And we are recording. So welcome to our drivers and coaches meeting for League Meet 5, which starts on Sunday morning and will end the following Saturday evening. And so I'm seeing an awful lot of teams that are newer teams, or they have a lot of young students on their team, just now really starting to pop up and starting to participate. And I really want to make sure that we can hammer out some questions that are in everybody's mind and just make sure that everybody's on the same page with the rules and stuff. Um, and so this is just going to be an open question type of drivers meeting like we traditionally do. It's just remote. This will end up on our YouTube channel. I will watch the chat for any questions written in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask your question. So question time is open. Let's see it. Anybody have any questions?
So if teams can't compete this league meet, mainly because of the weather, is there going to be a policy for dealing with that?
So with league meets, we want to take your best 10 scores. We do have a 6th league meet that will be in 2 weeks after this one. And so you can definitely get those 6 scores out of, if you compete with that one, get your top scores out of that if you haven't competed thus far. Christopher, do you want to talk about possibly how that works if you don't have all of your top 10 scores, if you haven't competed at all throughout the league meets?
Yeah, I'm not an expert on how exactly that gets scored, but what will happen is you will get credit for the matches that you have completed, and they will count towards your, so you end up with, from the league meets, you end up with your top 10. So if you only have 6, let's say, because you did one league meet, then your top 6 scores will be counted. And you won't, it doesn't actually count against you to not have those other scores, but it does count against you sort of, because your ranking points are based on the total number of points that you scored. So if you only have 6 matches that you've played, then you'll only be able to aggregate all or have the cumulative of all 6 of those matches that will count towards your ranking in whatever the event is. So you just end up with 4 scores that don't count, that you don't get credit for. So it's not really, I mean, it kind of hurts you, but it's not the end of the world. Then what happens is that when you go into a league tournament, you're actually going to be playing it'll be another 5 or 6 matches. I don't know if we're playing 6 matches this year. It's always been 5 in the past, but since we've been doing 6 for all the remote events, I don't know if we're going to be doing 6 for the league meet. So that would be a question for Travis, actually. But assume 5 matches, so you would get 5 more matches, and your top 15 scores go towards your rankings into, or the additional 5 scores get added into what you've already done. So that we don't take old scores from the league meets and put those in for those 5 scores that will count at the league tournament. You'll have 5 more scores that you get from the league tournament that will impact your ranking as well. So those all get added together, and you will have the chance at a league tournament. I mean, like, let's say you show up, you didn't compete in any of the league meets, and you show up the league tournament and you dominate and you win all the matches. You still may rank down lower because the other teams that competed in the league meets will have those scores that will rank them up higher. But if you dominated and you did really, really well, then the chances of being selected by one of the alliance partners are going to be very, very high, because they want, to align with teams that are very competitive. So you have to go and prove yourself at that event. That'll be your shot to really, really show off. Does that make sense?
Can I provide a little clarity on that
Yeah,
too?
go ahead, Chris.
So in part 1 of the league meet the manual, there's actually a section that actually is really good about talking about this. There are 3 sentences, and I can read them out. Pretty simple. Section 5.2, league meet tournament ranking calculation. It reads the following: the league tournament is based off the top 10 matches from all previous league meets plus 5 matches from the league tournament. So that I know Chris Smith talked about that. The 10 league matches, the 10 league meet matches are selected using the sort order from section 5.1. So of course, that's probably the previous section that talks about the 10 best scores. Teams with fewer than 15 matches total after the qualification matches at the tournament will only be ranked on the matches they played. So I just repeated what Chris said, but it is officially in part 1 under section 5.2.
Yeah, so
Spelling that out.
last year it was a little bit different in that made a bigger impact, because if you completed 5 matches from a league meet last year and you had, let's say you won all of your matches and you had 2 ranking points for each one of those, but you didn't compete in any of the, in a second league meet, and you did really well in the last one, you would average, your average ranking points would be potentially 2 because of the way that all worked out. So you would end up with a pretty high ranking, maybe a top ranking, even if you hadn't completed your matches last year. It was kind of strange the way that you could not complete all of your matches last year and still rank up really high because of the way the ranking points were done. This year, the ranking points are based on your score. So it kind of, it makes a big difference. If you get 0 versus getting 200 points, the 200 points is going to push your ranking way up in terms of, performance. So you need all of the matches you can get if you can, if at all possible.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. And you guys everybody should have seen the, from the highlight show on Wednesday night, you should have seen the match results from the last league meet. And you should have also seen the way that the league tournaments, who is currently assigned to each of the league tournaments and how they rank in those tournaments as well. So that's very useful information as you're trying to do your planning and figure out kind of your strategy going into those league meets. You need to make sure you know and understand where everybody stands and who you're competing against and where they rank and so forth.
That's why scouting is very important. If you haven't gotten to the point where scouting is a higher priority at your live events, I'd heavily recommend that you look into that, because either if you're a really great team with an awesome robot that is just knocking it out of the park, you are going to have to make a choice. Or if you want to get chosen, then make yourself marketable. Try and find a way to make yourself marketable to a team that will choose you. And so scouting works both ways. Got to understand where you're at and where everybody else in the event is at on their level and what they are capable of doing. So it also depends on the game. I mean, part of your scouting is determining who is a good fit for you. Like if you are very much a shooter robot and that is what your main thing is, then you might want to get somebody to pair with that's probably somebody that can at least mess with the wobble goals. Or if you have no autonomous, but you're awesome in other places, that's okay. Make sure you get somebody with you that can do a really good autonomous, just different things. Because many times I will find that we have 2 really great teams, but they just don't match each other very well. And that can cause issues because they didn't scout properly. And that's just your own observations. And sometimes you can give that job to somebody on your team who is like, well, I'm not a programmer, I'm not a builder, I did all the notebook stuff, but now I got nothing really much to do during the competition. Now you have a scouter position. So it just a word of advice on that, because scouting is quite important.
And to that point, this year, scouting may actually be easier than it has been in previous years, because a lot of teams are recording their matches in the remote events and they're posting those online. Now, the thing to think about and the thing to be aware of when you're scouting is that what teams are doing in remote events, for example, from an autonomous perspective, may not be what they do in live events. Because you can imagine that if in a remote event, a team is going after both wobble goals, well, in a live event, that's probably not a very good strategy if you've got 2 alliance partners that can take care of wobble goals. So there's a real opportunity for teams to reach out if you know what event you're going to and what other teams are going to be there, to reach out and find out what other teams can do and start coordinating with them, because you don't know who's going to be your alliance partner. And if you can coordinate with another team that's going to be at an event that you're going to be at, hopefully it'll be an in-person event. If not, then it'll be go back to remote, and I guess it won't really matter. But there's a real opportunity for you guys to work with them and collaborate and figure out, hey, if you guys can get power shots and we can get high shots, then you guys we'll take care of the power shots, and you take care of the high shots and autonomous, and work that out and try to coordinate that before you get to the event. Once you get to the event, it's a lot more challenging. Yeah. There's a question in here from Thomas asking about what's going to happen with the deadline for this league meet number 5. Is it going to be extended because of the weather? And at this point in time, the answer is we're not extending it. I don't think we really can, because FIRST has this kind of schedule set up with respect to the system where they really strongly discourage and make it difficult for us to be able to have a league meet start on Sunday and end beyond Saturday. There's a 7-day period that the league meets are supposed to be closed up. So I don't know that there's not an opportunity for us to push back on FIRST and say, hey, can we extend this a couple more days because of the weather situation? We'll push that with Travis, because ultimately Travis gets the final say on that. Mm-hmm. And I know there's a lot of, especially if we could get a lot more, if a lot of teams came and said, we can do this on Monday, give us till Monday to get our results in, I think there would be a lot more support to extend it beyond right. Saturday. Especially if we can get some of the teams that have never competed before. True. Love to have more teams competing.
But if you're one of those teams like Christopher's teams that are playing in their garage, please bundle up, be safe about it. Don't go out there and just try and tough it. Like, actually be safe, wear multiple layers and be good with it. And wouldn't it almost be too cold for something to function on a robot possibly? Because it's really stinking cold out there.
Yeah, we very likely
cell phones don't like cold like that.
We're looking for other places to maybe do our competition this week.
One interesting thing would be flexible parts on people's intakes might not be nearly as flexible. So some people might have problems with not like electronic components, but actual moving parts of the robot not working how they used to because of how cold they are.
Or shooter wheels potentially having problems because they're, some people are using compliant wheels, and the compliant wheels may not be quite as compliant. That might create some problem. I certainly hope there are no issues with, wheels exploding because they're not supposed to, you're spinning at, 6,000 RPM or whatever, and they're frozen and they're not supposed to do that. So certainly want to be careful about what you're doing if you're working in a garage like we are.
Other questions?
So Thomas had mentioned that it's not supposed to be above freezing until the following Monday, but I thought I saw on the forecast that maybe Friday and Saturday was supposed to be up into the 40s, so it would be above freezing on Saturday, but maybe that's changed.
It has possibly changed, and also definitely depends on which part of Oklahoma you're in. If you're in southeastern part of Oklahoma, you're probably going to get warmer quicker.
Yeah.
If you're in northwestern, you're going to be hanging on to that cold for a little longer. Wonder if the rings flex different in cold weather.
They might. I'll tell you, and we've done some interesting, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but we have done some interesting experiments with the rings, and we have discovered that some rings actually, whenever you're trying to keep your speed of your shooter down so that you're not firing at super high speed and have Ingrid go and make you retest and make sure that you're within the letter of the law, We found that some rings actually will not fly as well as other rings, and we can reproduce it, by doing tests over and over again. We can say this ring is not going to fly very well, stick it in, and it'll shoot into a mid goal at the same speed that another ring will fly and hit the high goal, no problem. And we can reproduce it over and over again. And we're trying to figure out exactly why that is. We're not 100% sure, but we think that if a ring goes through and gets deformed a lot, gets compressed or whatever, it gives it some characteristics that maybe it's not spinning as well. Even though it might look okay, it doesn't spin quite as well, and it just drops and doesn't
So
fly as easily.
I had a hypothesis when they released this game that we would have some, ring deformities, not
Mhm,
so much like it would be like really terrible and it's going to turn into an oval instead of a circle, like
mhm.
not so much that, but I figured it might, since they're foam, it might actually affect how a ring flies the more you use it. If you deform it more, it might not fly as well because it's losing its stiffness over time from use.
Yeah. Well, so we have, and Elizabeth is putting here in the chat, I see softer equals shoot lower, harder equals shoot higher. And so that makes me think that you guys have seen some similar behaviors. And I honestly, I couldn't tell you that the ring hardness makes much difference, because the rings that we've checked out and we tested and we measured, we've weighed them, we've we've gotten out calipers and tried to figure out what the difference is, and we really aren't seeing any difference whatsoever, except that the only thing we've noticed is that some of the rings, whenever they get deformed, like they get jammed into the robot during the gameplay process, like during dry practice or whatever, those then don't tend to shoot as well right immediately after they've been deformed into the process. So,
Well,
so
Thomas brought up a good point too about if we go to an in-person event, maybe we bring more rings than the standard 20 and we try to parse it down to 20 consistent rings. But I do agree that's going to get to I know.
It's very interesting.
That's
And I'm kind of curious, is anybody else seeing that same behavior? Are you able to reproduce and, like, fire 10 shots, have, one or two drop into the mid goal, and then set those aside and reshoot them and get exactly the same results? Are you seeing that? Because we can consistently reproduce it on certain rings. It's amazing.
I mean, I can kind of, after watching so many videos and seeing certain robots that consistently shoot in a particular goal, there's like every once in a while you'll see this one ring go into a mid goal instead of a high goal. And it looks like it should have made it, but it just
Mhm.
didn't. And so I can kind of give a testament to that.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, so it brings up the question, what's going to happen in a live event, because it's going to change the dynamics. In a remote event, it's not really that big of a deal. I mean, it kind of sort of is, but it's not that big of a deal, because if you shoot into the high goal and every once in a while one goes into the mid goal, you still got all the points. You get credit for everything. You just don't get as many points. In a in-person event, it completely changes things, because now you're shooting into the high goal, you get the points for that, and then you shoot into the mid goal, and those are points that go to the other team. So not only are you getting reduced points, you're not getting any points, and you're giving the points to the other team. So it's a negative factor in terms of how things play out in an in-person event.
So hint, hint, get your accuracy to that high goal spot on as best as you can. So that way you don't accidentally give the other team points.
Well, but if it's the rings that, and until you've seen this, Ingrid, it's hard to describe, but the rings will fire accurately up into the high goal, and then certain rings will just kind of drop. I mean, they just fall right. It's a weird to watch them, because it's not like they're barely missing. It's like they go up and they just arc at a different angle and go straight into the mid goal.
Well,
So one way to fix it is to potentially speed up your shooter so that you're firing at a much higher speed, and then that overcomes that particular issue. But then you run into issues with firing too hot.
firing too hot, or I mean, your arc is going to be about the same because you're shooting at the same angle, but yeah, it'd be firing too hot. But I think I'm not 100% certain because we're still working on getting our fields for live events, getting them in the right places and stuff. But
Yep.
As much as I understand it and know, we're probably going to use the one that is we're waiting on one from another place, and then we're waiting on them from two different places. And I think only one of those places has even really used the rings. The other one, it's still been in a box. So
Yeah.
we'll probably, those rings probably haven't been moved, like deformed very much, if at all.
Yeah.
So they probably are good.
So there are some other things, and one of the interesting things about atomic gears, because you guys say that you're seeing this problem, we tested it consistently with Project Peacock's robot, and their atomic gears and Peacock, I believe, are both using the same kind of wheels to shoot with. So I think they're both using the BaneBots wheels, if I'm correct. And we also did some additional testing with Mousefit and Leviathan's robots, and they have some other issues. So we can't get the same consistent testing results that we get with the Peacock, but they're using GEC compliant wheels, and they get slightly different results. They seem to be a little bit more accurate. So we were wondering if maybe the compliant wheels might be better because and I see that Jeremiah made a comment in here about hearing that compression helps with some consistency. With the GEC wheels, they expand whenever you're spinning them. And so you can get compression with the, when you shoot, the wheels actually compress back up as does the ring itself to a certain extent. And so you may actually get better compression. Probably depends on exactly how you assemble it together to get better results with compliant wheels as opposed to using the BaneBots wheels. So I'm kind of curious about that as well. If you guys do some testing, that's one of the things that I would check into is see if different wheels give you different results now that you are seeing different behaviors with the rings, and maybe it's the hardness of the ring, or over time they get a little more hard, or the more you play around with them, they get kind of more solid versus the softer version.
We got really sciencey there.
Yeah, sorry. No, there's some very interesting stuff. So it looks like Elizabeth's thinking about maybe making adjustments to the RPM. But then that would be kind of interesting, Elizabeth. And you might come off of mute and explain what you're thinking there, because I'm curious if you're suggesting that you would somehow determine that a ring is going to shoot a particular way and you adjust your RPM for the ring itself based on how you think that particular ring is going to behave. Is that what you're suggesting? Elizabeth's shy today. She doesn't want to come off mute.
Okay, she can chat. She can put it in chat. We'll read it out.
Yeah, that's fine.
She's probably typing her response. She says, "Hold up, let me get to a place where it won't echo." I feel
just get away from her dad.
I feel you. I feel it so hard because I'm in an office now. I moved and it's so echoey in here. I've got blankets on the walls.
Oh, there she is. Yeah.
Hi.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so my thought was, for instance, if the driver shoots the ring and notice it's shooting really low or really high, the driver can then adjust the RPM or keep an eye on that ring, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Then you have to have some way of being able to track that ring and know that it is not wasn't just a speed up issue or a getting your motor up to speed. Now you guys, I know, run your motors at speed all the time, so that's not an issue, but some people will kick their motors up to speed when they're ready to shoot and try to save battery. So it might be really challenging to keep track of the ring that is giving you problems and the reasons why that ring is giving you problems while you're in the middle of a match. But certainly
One ring
is
that ruins it all.
Yeah, it certainly is feasible.
Yeah, that was just like the first solution that popped into mind when I thought about how can you fix the ring shooting high or low.
Yeah, another no, that's interesting. It's a very interesting problem in my mind, and it adds a very different dynamic to the game itself. So.
Does anybody have any rules questions?
I want to just say something,
Yeah.
just an observation I had, that whenever Elizabeth was talking and it was the yellow ring around Thomas's, it just was a funny dichotomy of that Thomas's face there coming out with Elizabeth's voice.
Yes, I almost went and took her laptop. So we were in the same room. She's logged in on the TV, so I'm turning it down now. So
Thank you.
Yeah, so, sorry about that.
Oh, it's funny.
So I do have an observation while we see if anybody's waiting for any rule questions about people who are submitting videos. This goes back to obviously when you all are submitting videos, you know, many of you show the randomization ABC, which is great. Something that would be probably, maybe Miss Ingrid has some magic with her purple hair that she can do it better than I can. But the times that I've been reviewing videos, it'd be good to sometimes have teams, after they show the randomization, say that we've loaded this many rings into the robot. Some teams have not, some teams don't load 3 rings, which is okay. It just means that it has to go into the low goal. If correct, Miss England, it has to go into the low goal. And then we have to try and count, you know, there's 10 rings in play. Okay, is the human player returning all those rings to the field after autonomous ends?
Or even just counting, controlling, and autonomous, because that is something that you still have to worry about, and autonomous is controlling. So if you have that target zone C is your randomization, and you have, I don't know, 1 ring or 2 rings or 3 rings, and we can't see them because naturally your robot, the way your hopper is designed or whatever you've got, hides those rings. It makes it difficult for us to go, oh, they have rings in that robot, until we, you know, like 30 seconds on down the line, if you don't shoot those rings during autonomous, which is a-okay, you can get yourself all set up for driver control period. But we have to kind of like backtrack and go, oh, that was controlling there whenever they went over the stack or something like that, and it moved all the rings with the robot and stuff. It's just, it would be a little bit helpful to know how many rings the robot starts off with. And generally, I mean, everyone pretty much does their autonomous, they run their autonomous the same way throughout the entire meet. Sometimes they might do a tweak, but for the most part, your first match, if you're going to be like, well, our robot's going to hold on to 3 rings, okay, cool. I don't have to see it every single time if that's just generally how you run your robot for autonomous. So just kind of a little note. I should probably put that on our submission form.
Yeah. It's not, and it's not something that I in a live event, you know, the referees and Miss Ingrid would see you guys preload that.
Yes.
I mean, it just in a recording, because some of you start it before certain times before other ones do. Even as a quick, simple, okay, we got target zone C, we've loaded 3 rings in the robot. Just that quick extra sentence or blurb.
And we can generally even see, like,
right.
We don't have to watch the randomization anymore, because now it's pretty obvious. We can see what the randomization was on the field with the starter stack. It actually is very obvious to see. So yeah, just a quick little note. We can change it up a little bit.
Where would you draw the line between controlling and plowing in autonomous then? Because if we have 3 rings in the robot and then we drive through the stack and it just plows through it without giving us any strategic advantage, will we get a penalty or not?
It really depends, because it's kind of hard to tell sometimes whether or not it's going to give you a strategic advantage. So take, for instance, you have your C stack. That's the one that everyone struggles with. You do get some sort of advantage by plowing, like knocking that stack over. So that way it's easier for later on. So you don't have to worry about it. So if you accidentally knock that stack over during autonomous, you kind of set yourself up for success in driver control period. But it could have legit been an accident. So it's kind of hard to tell. And we want to give you a benefit of the doubt on that, but at the same time, it's hard to tell. But plowing is basically, you have a bunch of rings right in front of the robot, and they're going to get stuck in front of the robot and follow the same direction of the robot. But clearly your robot is showing traveling from point A to point B without actually doing anything with those rings. Like it's like, if those rings didn't exist, the robot would still go from point A to point B. And when it gets to point B, it's like, I have nothing to do with these rings. And so it goes about its business doing something else. Now, if it looks like you're going from point A to point B and like, oh, I so happen to pick up all of these rings and they're on this side of the field, and that's so much easier. Let me just grab them while I'm here. Controlling. It's hard. Plowing and controlling is really hard to tell sometimes. And what makes it easy to tell is if the rings deflect off the robot. That makes it obvious for plowing. What do I mean by deflect? That means that the ring is not following the same direction as the robot. It goes in a slightly different direction or in a completely different direction. So if you have a robot that has flat in front of it, and it's gonna basically make rings go with it, that makes it where it's plowing is hard to figure out. But if your robot is kind of like circular shaped, or kind of, it has angle in the front, and so rings, as you are going forward, the rings are actually going up a different direction, that's easy to tell. That's obvious plowing because of deflection. So we've struggled with this every single year with different games. So we always have to look at the intent of the robot. And in autonomous, it gets difficult with that ring stack, because was it the intent of the robot to knock over that ring stack to benefit for driver control later? So my advice is just avoid the ring stack during autonomous. I can't give you a solid answer on that. You have to look at the intent of the robot and how the gameplay is going.
And that kind of gets to Jeremiah's question that he just posted in the chat. If we plow reins and they end up in a strategic position, can we avoid using them to avoid a penalty?
Well, I mean, what was the intent? Was your robot going from point A to point B, and then they back off and go to totally different point C? Or were they, let's say they plow through that ring stack, and then they go up to the launch line, launch the rings that they already had inside of them, and then they go around sniffing for other rings. They don't sniff for those rings that are right in front of them. They go and get some other rings somewhere else. Okay, I won't consider that plowing, because yes, you took those rings. You could have easily picked them up right in front of you, right at the launch line, but you decided not to make it obvious that you were not controlling. And maybe later you go and get them.
Can I, so you kind of said two different things at the same time. You wouldn't consider it controlling, right? Because you said you wouldn't consider it plowing. You said you wouldn't consider it plowing.
I wouldn't consider it controlling. Yeah. I would consider it plowing. Sorry.
Right.
It's really a sticky situation, and I really wish that FIRST would come up with some ways to define it even more so. But the best that they can tell me, which I can tell you, is you look at the intent of the robot. What is the robot's action, and what is the intent behind that action? And then you just call it from there. It's difficult. This job is not an easy job. And so I think it's awesome that you guys are doing as great as you are and really digging into these rules, because it's every year it's a challenge on our end as a referee, is to go, what is the intent of the robot? What is the intent that the student driving the robot has with this robot? And sometimes we even go and look at your faces to see what's going on. Like if it was a complete accident, it shows up on your face very easily. So sometimes I'll look at you and you're like, why are you looking at me? It's because I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Don't lie. Please don't lie. I don't like liars. So, but like, just, it's just hard sometimes. And so you have to look at all the different variables that are there in that moment. And it has to be a really quick process. You have to think very quickly in the moment about it. Is that controlling or is that not? And so that's why sometimes we'll call it and sometimes we won't, because we're really not sure sometimes. It's really hard to tell. And I'm sure a lot of you are also figuring that out as you are playing and trying to call your own penalties and such.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense. So I guess what I would gather from that is in autonomous, really try not to hit the rings, but make sure that if you do hit the rings, you're not going to then go and do something else immediately afterwards that makes it look like you were trying to get an advantage from doing that.
Yeah. Make it look like the intent of the robot was not to do a controlling thing.
And I've seen it before in autonomous too, where a team will deliver one wobble goal and then they'll pick up the second wobble goal and they'll do a linear path and they somehow bump into the ring stack. And I've had to get Ingrid's review on that, but it's okay. She asked me, okay, oh, they got the second wobble goal in the hand and the robot was off by a few inches and they end up bumping the stack.
Right.
And then it's like, okay, the intent, from what we saw, the intent was not there to use those rings.
Mm-hmm.
They were just collateral at that point. But
yeah,
there's some harder times where it's not as straightforward as just that.
And we've seen robots in Oklahoma and outside of Oklahoma that they are using that ring stack, but they only knock off the top 3 rings. So if you don't have any rings on your robot when you're doing that and you only knock off the top 3 rings, then you're technically only knocking off the top 3 rings. You're only controlling that. And then they use those rings and they shoot in the high goal or the power shots. And then they come back and get that 4th ring and they shoot that. And that is totally legal to do because you're controlling within that 3 ring limit. And it comes down to the design of the robot.
So for Ingrid and Chris, I want to let you guys know that sometimes these matches are very difficult to referee when you're reffing, you're commentating, and you're keeping score on everything that's going on a remote match. And so I imagine we probably miss a few things in the process.
And that's okay.
Actually, your feedback that you guys give is awesome because when we go back and look at the things that you guys see that we missed whenever we first went through it, and we can make corrections as we go through that. So I really do very much appreciate what you guys do there.
Some of the teams too are also having aha moments that Ingrid probably has all the time, where I've seen some teams that hit a ring, suck it in for a few seconds and go, uh-oh, is that controlling? We'll have to go read about that. Yeah, I mean, Ingrid and I have to do that all the time, where we have to reread the description, reread the rule, and obviously, if I have a question about it, I'm going to defer to Ingrid, and head ref is the head ref decision.
My game manual too is up in the browser almost all of the time, just to make sure that it's the right rule, choosing the right rule, referencing which way does this process, answering questions, any of that stuff. I read these rules a lot. And I also read the forums, and I get on conference calls with the universal head ref and ask him questions. And there's actually a question right now I'm waiting on him to answer. And it does have to do with a controlling issue. It's if you take in one too many rings in your intake, but it's only going, your intake can only go one direction. And the only way you can get rid of that extra ring is to shoot it. What do you do? Especially if your shooter only goes at one power and at one angle, what do you do? Because there's an interesting scenario that I saw a team do. And so I don't know if that's legal or not. So that's why I'm asking him. So there is like a process of asking questions. I'm definitely not all knowing, but I study a lot. And so I encourage everyone to read the rules right before you start a league meet, just because you slept since the last time you played or read the rules and stuff. So just refreshing your memory. And sometimes even in mid-season, I'll go, oh, I know I've read that like 5 times, but it just now clicked. Oh, geez, I've been calling that wrong this whole season. And then I have to call it right the rest of the season. And everyone's experienced that. And it happens sometimes. It's just, we're human. We're not perfect.
The goal is as consistent, fair, and fun gameplay as possible across all events. And I think, I know Ingrid definitely strives for that.
I would hope that everybody strives for that. Anybody that's involved in first. I think that's a huge part of our culture that we have. Do we have any other questions?
So I'm curious, how many teams think they're actually going to be able to compete this week with the weather as it is?
I'm betting we'll probably see, I mean, this is general tendency anyways. Teams usually wait towards the latter part of the week. But I think for sure they probably will wait till the latter part of the week because of the weather and stuff.
Yeah.
It's not looking good for us to be able, it depends on next Saturday, says Thomas for Atomic Gears.
Yeah. I think we're going to be depending on next Saturday as well.
I would definitely say communicate like we have through the season, especially on Discord and with Travis. Communication's key. Especially when you have like a with a couple of us reviewing the videos, you know, we're trying to turn those around as best as possible to give you all feedback, but we know that you know, you all are submitting scores, and obviously uploading the video is probably not the critical priority after you're done with a match.
Yeah.
You're probably going to save those up until you're done. But just communicating through the Discord or otherwise where you're at. I mean, we don't know what we don't know until some of you let us know. So.
So, Ingrid, any more information on state?
Nothing as of right now. Yeah, we're focusing on our live events coming up, and we're still seeing what our options are for state. That's about the best advice I can give right now. Best information.
One thing we're fairly certain about state for this year is that it will not be at SWASU.
Yeah.
Because they closed down the campus, and you know, by the time that we're going to be having state this year. And so we are looking for alternative locations. And specifically, we're looking for locations that are hopefully pandemic friendly. And when I say that, what I mean is we're looking for locations that could potentially be outdoors, or have big open areas with lots of good ventilation and that sort of thing. So there are some pavilions that we're looking at and different options, but nothing, I think from a location perspective, it's not nailed down just yet.
And it also would be kind of ideal if we could get it more centralized to the teams that will be competing. Something to where people can just drive to the event and then not have to stay in a hotel overnight?
Yeah,
Just drive to the event and then drive back home in the same day?
So for this year, the plan is that it will just be a 1-day event. It's not going to be a 2-day event like it has been in the past. That way we can minimize the need for anybody staying in hotels. And all of the judging will probably be remote, like we're doing for these events, the league meet events or the league tournament events. And the league tournaments should be helping us to train for the state event, hopefully. However, that's going to come out.
We're learning lots of new things throughout this season. And so we're doing the best that we can for everyone.
And there is a town hall, I think, this time next week that they're asking the coach from each team to attend, but anybody else could attend. So if there is new information, it'll probably be disclosed there and fed down through the newsletters.
Absolutely.
Yep. And if you guys have suggestions or recommendations or, anything, please feed them in.
One good thing that you could do to prepare for any of these live events is check out the game manual 2 for the live event, for a traditional event, I should say, because it's a separate manual and it does have a few extra rules, which it's the original manual. Remote manual, which we've been going off of, has the defense type things removed. It's the same rule numbers. It's just you'll notice that you might be skipping a rule number. Just it'll be gone for remote event. So check out the traditional and also check out the traditional forum, so that way you can better prepare, because it's a very different. It's not terribly different, but your game strategy will be very different whenever you have 3 other robots on the field, cooperating with 1, defending against 2. And so how does that play out? I mean, first off, we all understand, I should hope by now, that your tower, when we go into a live event, your mid goal on your tower with your human player is not your mid goal. It's the opposing alliance's mid goal. And so if you want to make mid goal points, you got to go shoot at the other tower on the other side of the field. But also you have to consider pinning and blocking and how that works out. What happens when there's another dead robot on the field that might potentially be blocking something? What do you do in that situation? So you have a month until our first live event if you're competing at the one in Mustang. And so start looking at it now. So that way you can not only understand what you're going into, but start developing those game strategies. Doing it on the fly might work for some people, but generally teams survive better whenever they have a plan in place of, okay, this is what we're going to do against all these other teams and with this partner. And you can also plan for your autonomous that way. You don't have to go with just one autonomous now. You can make so many autonomouses to work with your partner. If your partner can only get 1 wobble goal, cool. Make sure you have a plan for that so you don't accidentally mess up their autonomous as well. So just start your strategic planning right now. Got a month.
I think it's funny that there is growing traction in the chat for a game manual traditional Kahoot game at the next drivers meeting. That's kind of like, I think that's funny watching everyone start building momentum on that. Yeah, and some of those, without reading it out, some of those blocking rules that are in traditional game manual 2 are major penalties that can escalate to a yellow card quickly.
Yeah.
So they're not
playing around.
They're
So be very careful. That's why it's very important to plan ahead, just to be on the safe side. Know where your boundaries are. And it could be helpful to maybe do a little bit of robot redesign, because it's not just your rings flying in the air now. You got other rings flying in the air from other robots. You want to be careful if a ring so happens to fall on your robot and get stuck on top and you can't get it off. That's still part of your controlling, even if it's an accident.
And this also feeds back to the fact of your scouting and also your human players too, because if you have 2 teams on an alliance, you may choose that your team's human player may be it sometimes, and then your other alliance teammate may be the human player. So you all have been feeding your own rings up until this point, but what's going to happen if someone else feeds rings? The ring must contact the ground before contacting the robot. That's a penalty. If that is broken, there's a lot of different strategy.
Jeremiah says, turtle shell for the robot, so all the rings slide off. Any other questions before we shut it down for the evening? I'm going to guess that's it. So, well, thanks everybody for showing up for our drivers and coaches meeting. Code petition. So I'm looking forward to seeing your videos if you choose to submit them. And I'm also looking forward to talking about robots again here in about a week or so. So send me those videos. It'd be really awesome to see them. And good luck.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.